Hello.
It's hello.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello there.
Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place to have with another Star Wars story. Today we'll discover what would have happened had Plo Koon left the Jedi Order with Ahsoka. Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of the Pente Patrol team. If you want a chance to win in our next giveaway, watch to the end of the video and I will tell you exactly how you can win a free lightsaber. Our story begins inside of the Jedi Council chambers. Ahsoka had just undergone her greatest trial. She was convicted of bombing the Jedi Temple when she wasn't even on Coruscant. At the time, her and her master were leading a campaign on Cato Neimoidia. They were contacted by Grandmaster Yoda and told to come back to the Jedi Order. Somehow it all led to Ahsoka being convicted for something her friend Barriss Offee had done. It was an unfortunate set of events, but there was nothing that could be done to change what had already happened. The Council pushed her out of their order, and now they were standing before her, arrogantly offering her the opportunity to return to their ranks as a Jedi Knight. Ahsoka was just 17, and becoming a Jedi Knight at such a young age was an incredible feat, but she just looked at the Council members with disgust. Quite frankly, Ahsoka couldn't believe that the Council could just act so repugnant. Their behavior was disgusting and disgraceful. They were essentially trying to bribe her back into the Order, and that's how exactly she perceived it. While Ki-Adi-Mundi, Mace Windu, tried to act like it was the Force working in mysterious ways, Ahsoka wasn't really buying it. But there was one thing. One person who made her feel almost inclined to stay within the Order, more than anyone else. That was her master. He stood adjacent from her, with near tears in his eyes. He never wanted this to happen to her, and he felt almost solely responsible for it. He blamed himself for not being a better teacher when it was not at all his fault, nor his responsibility for her exile from the Order. Ahsoka looked up at her master as Anakin told her that the Council was asking for her to come back, as he held out his hand and opened it, showing Ahsoka's Padawan braid. Anakin told her that he was also asking her back into the Order. Ahsoka looked at Anakin as he held his metallic forearm out, desperately asking his student, the closest individual other than Obi-Wan and Padawan to family, that she come back to the Order. Ahsoka paused. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked down at her master's hand. Ahsoka thought about it. She felt the inclination to stay within the Order as she looked at Anakin to see his ocean eyes staring down at her. Could she really stay? Ahsoka's eyes looked back over the Council members whose shadows dimmed out the room. Ahsoka's eyes went back and forth to Anakin's hands as her heart stopped as she placed both of her hands on Anakin's. Ahsoka closed his hands and told him that she wasn't coming back. Anakin's heart stopped instantaneously as he looked at Ahsoka and saw her face hide in a shadow of tears as she quickly turned away from her master. Anakin looked at her as she turned away and stepped out of the room, hurrying away towards the elevator that could take her down into the temple itself so that she could leave the Order. Ahsoka shuffled away as she wiped tears from her eyes. She got into the elevator and closed the door immediately. Anakin held his hand where Ahsoka left it. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He couldn't believe that Ahsoka would just leave. Anakin stepped forward. Obi-Wan tried to step forward to stop him or comfort him or something, but Plo Koon stopped Obi-Wan by lightly placing his hand on his shoulder. Plo Koon slipped out from behind the other Council members as Anakin stepped forward and out of the room. Plo Koon was one of the wisest members on the Council, and he was going to try and console Anakin. Plo Koon stepped out of the room as he looked at Anakin. It wasn't Anakin. It was a shell of the Jedi's chosen one who stood before him. Anakin had a hopeless feeling within himself. He was lost in his mind. Anakin looked out the window next to him and saw his reflection. A tear fell down his face as he looked at the failure of a teacher that he was. Anakin looked down at the ground without noticing or even hearing Plo Koon enter the room behind him. Anakin used his hand to wipe away tears from his eyes as he felt the weight of the galaxy etching itself across his back. Anakin then turned his attention to Plo Koon when he felt the gentle hand on his back. Anakin looked at Plo and tried to hide his tears as Plo tried to make Anakin feel as comfortable as he could. Plo told Anakin that it wasn't his fault for Ahsoka's departure, and he needed to know that. In the moment, Anakin was far too emotional to make a response. He looked at Plo and then turned his head back to the elevator. Plo told Anakin that he should be proud of Ahsoka for her decision. It took the teachings of a true Jedi Master to inspire such a respectable decision from a student. Ahsoka would not have made the decision if she had been Kenobi's student, and while that wasn't disrespectful to Obi-Wan, it was respectful to Anakin. Plo watched as the lift opened. He placed his hand on Anakin's shoulder and guided him in. Anakin held his head down as he tried to avoid looking at Plo. He couldn't avoid that this was happening. Plo Koon continued telling Anakin that he was a wise master, and his actions as a teacher gave Ahsoka the ability and the courage to not just go through such an unfair trial, but also make the decision to live a life that she wanted for herself. Anakin rebutted, asking why Plo would just vote against her. Plo shook his head, saying that he was on Ahsoka's side the entire time, just like Obi-Wan and Shaak-Ti. But Anakin needed to understand that the Council was never perfect, and that's why they always didn't make the best decisions. It was hard for them to always be right, because they couldn't always be that. Then Plo admitted that he didn't expect the Council to make the decision, and it truly hurt to see the Council become so ignorant in their decision-making. Anakin looked over and asked why Plo stayed on the Council then. Plo told Anakin that he believed he could make the right decisions to rightfully impact the Council. There was more behind those words, but he didn't have time to say it now. Anakin sighed, because it obviously didn't seem to work. The elevator doors opened as Anakin and Plo looked up to see Ahsoka leaving. Anakin asked what he should do. Plo told Anakin to trust in the Force and allow it to guide him. Anakin then ran after Ahsoka as Plo Koon watched Anakin take off. Plo would follow slowly behind as he watched Anakin chase after his former student. Plo knew exactly what Anakin would do. Anakin acted off of impulse a lot, and was obviously following that trend of chasing impulse rather than thinking it through. But Plo understood. When he had a Padawan, he would have done the same thing. Being a teacher was a great respect for a Jedi, and if a student left the Order or failed, the teacher saw it as their own failure rather than their students'. It's why Yoda struggled with inner peace after his final student left the Order, becoming the 20th member of the Lost 20. Plo could completely understand Yoda's disconnect after Dooku's departure, and he could also completely understand Anakin's feelings now. Plo followed Anakin out to the steps of the Jedi Temple. When Plo got to the steps, he could see Ahsoka in the light as Anakin stood in the darkness of the shadow. Plo Koon closed in to hear the tail end of the conversation, where Ahsoka said that she needed to find out who she was, without the Council and without Anakin. Plo understood this, of course he did. He really did. But Plo also understood that Ahsoka was making a rash decision. Not to leave the Order, no, that was perfectly fine, but to cut herself off for those who were there when no one else was a certainly brash decision. It was rather sad, too. Anakin and Plo, aside from Kenobi, Rex, and Yoda, were present people in Ahsoka's life. They were always there for her. Plo spoke up as he looked into Anakin's eyes, seeing the Chosen One still trying to hide his tears. Plo told Ahsoka that he would accompany her if she allowed it. Ahsoka hesitated. She didn't expect this action from Plo. Anakin looked at Plo with shock written across his face. How could a council member just leave for no reason? Plo had plenty of reasons to do so, but he had a certain amount of responsibility for Ahsoka. He, after all, was the one who brought her to the Jedi Temple, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to her. Sure, Plo believed that Ahsoka would thrive outside the temple, but he wanted to be there with her, not for a selfish reason, but for her good only. It was a perfect excuse for Plo to remove himself from the Jedi Order as well. Ahsoka shrugged her shoulders as Plo told her that it needed to be a definitive answer. He wouldn't force his way onto her journey, if she didn't want him there. But Plo also believed that he could be of assistance to what she wanted to achieve. Plo, along with Shaak-Ti, were the most balanced members of the Jedi Council. They were the quietest members who disassociated themselves from the Jedi Council and from the Jedi's Republic politics, and they both believed in the usage of the Force and the true testament to what it meant to the Jedi to use the Force. Ahsoka looked at Plo and then over to Anakin, who straightened his stance and stood next to Plo as if to mimic what the Jedi Master was doing. Plo looked over at Anakin and then back to Ahsoka, who nodded her head and said that Plo could join her. Anakin's mouth hung low. He couldn't believe a Jedi Master that had been on the Council for as long as he was alive was about to leave the Council to assist Ahsoka. Anakin felt a draw to follow in their footsteps. He looked at Plo and then to Ahsoka and asked if he could join them as well. Anakin didn't really think about what all this would mean, especially this far into the second year of combat during the Clone Wars. But Anakin felt so dissociated from the Jedi Council, he couldn't believe their actions, and he was so willing to leave. Ahsoka nodded her head, just as she had done to Plo, and told Anakin that he could join them. While Ahsoka had just given the entire argument for why she wanted to leave the Order, there was really nothing she could do to counter-argue about the two of her role models wanting to follow her and help her in her journey. Both Anakin and Plo knew they were about to leave the Order, but it was worthwhile. Of course, both Anakin and Plo would miss their clones, but they needed to do this. So the three of them walked down the steps of the Jedi Temple. They were going to acquire a vessel, and then with said vessel they would continue and go away from Coruscant, and get a better feel for the galaxy as citizens of the galaxy. Inside the council chambers, Yoda sat down in his seat and lowered his head. The council members all moved back to their respective seats. They could all feel it. One of the Order's best, the Chosen One, and Ahsoka had all left the Order. There was nothing they could do to stop it. The motion had been carried out, and now the council sat in silence. The sun set on Coruscant, and for hours the council members would just sit in their chamber without saying a word. They would all have their eyes closed, meditating in their own unique ways. Plo was one of the oldest on the council, and his leaving would leave a gap in the Order, especially because his seat was a lifetime seat on the council. Without Plo, the council would have to fill a massive hole. He was one of the biggest heartbeats on the council, a member with compassion that led a legion that was known for its ability to effectively lead mercy missions and reconnaissance missions successfully. Ahsoka, Plo, and Anakin would make their way down to a shipyard and purchase a ship. Before they left, though, Anakin would have to confess to both of them that he was married. This surprisingly didn't surprise Plo Koon. Ahsoka was pretty unsurprised as well. It wasn't hard to figure out. Anakin wasn't the average Jedi. He was very caring, and he was also especially close to Senator Amidala. If they weren't married, it would have been a bigger surprise. But Plo and Ahsoka saw it coming, as they asked if Anakin would bring her along. Anakin admitted that they wouldn't, but he wanted to express that he would try and be more open about his relationship. For Anakin, telling Plo and Ahsoka took a massive weight off of his shoulders. It was something he didn't realize troubled him as much as it did. No longer being a Jedi that couldn't be married, Anakin felt a whole lot better about everything. He felt content because he didn't know how much hiding his marriage stressed him out. The three would depart from Coruscant and would go deep into the galaxy. There was a magnitude of planets that they could go to, but the two Jedi looked at Master Plo and wondered where they would go, where they should go. Plo looked at the two and told them that this was their journey. He was just going to guide them when they needed him. He was their support, not the expedition leader. Because Anakin and Ahsoka were much younger than Plo, he wanted the two of them to experience this journey for themselves and enjoy it. Though Plo did suggest that they go to a world where the war wasn't currently at, and also a world that they hadn't been to. Ahsoka and Anakin looked through the galactic map that was a part of the ship that they purchased. There was a planet that Ahsoka had in mind. It was a planet in the Mid-Rim. It was a planet that seemed very peaceful. She said the name of Lothal, and Plo leaned back in his seat and thought back to his knowledge of Lothal. It had a Jedi temple on it, and it would be a great place for both Anakin and Ahsoka to find and continue their journey together. Plo would obviously join them inside the temple, but he believed that Lothal would be a perfect starting point for this journey of theirs. The starship they bought lifted up into the air and took off. Anakin and Ahsoka looked out the windows as if to say goodbye to Coruscant for the time being. Anakin had informed Padme about his decision to leave the Jedi Order, and that he was going to continue his journey off-world for a little bit. Padme actually understood why Anakin was doing this, and she supported him fully. While Anakin may have not been fully aware of the stresses of the Jedi Order, Padme knew what it did to him, and it worried her. Seeing that Anakin could freely go out into the galaxy and learn more about himself and the Force without the strict guidelines of the Order made Padme extremely happy for her husband. All she wanted for him was for him to be happy, so she wanted him to go out and find more about the Force. Plo and Ahsoka were also quite supportive of Anakin and his marriage. While Plo had no reason to hold it against him, even as a Jedi, he surprised Anakin by the amount of support he had for him. The journey through hyperspace would begin. Immediately, both Anakin and Ahsoka would talk about the instant relief from their departure from the Council. They felt no more pressure, and they felt as if they could settle down and relax for the time being. Like there was nothing holding them down. Plo sat in the corner of the bridge and listened to the two of them talk about their feelings towards the Jedi. Plo was relatively excited for them. They were finally able to communicate how they felt. Plo Koon wasn't exactly a normal Jedi. He was once a Barando sage. This was an order of priests from his homeworld of Doran. They didn't have issues with attachment. Their main priority as priests was caring for others. This carried on throughout Plo's life and influenced him heavily. While Plo had no inclination to fall in love or start a relationship or a family, he was compassionate to those, like Anakin, who felt open to that type of love in life. Plo Koon had the empathy an entire council couldn't atone for. While Plo sat there, he realized that there was much more that Anakin and Ahsoka needed to learn about the Force. Plo Koon was one of the most balanced Jedi on the Council. Having been the one to discover electric judgment and having been known to be one of the most understanding members in the Order, Plo believed that Anakin and Ahsoka could thrive if he helped them find balance within themselves. Without a code to go by, Plo knew that Anakin, especially, would be able to excel in his personal life. The trio would land on Lothal and immediately begin to set up their camp. Anakin, Ahsoka, and Plo had all their supplies laid out. As Plo began to walk through the tall grass, his cape flowed behind him as he looked across at the massive rocks that stood before him. Anakin was unloading more supplies as his little R2 unit followed him out of the ship. Ahsoka steadied herself forward as she looked at what Plo Koon was doing. Plo turned around and saw both Skywalker and Tano standing behind him, a little bit distanced from one another. Anakin placed a crate down on the ground and told R2 to stay with the supplies. Plo waved over the two of them to come over to where he was. Plo told the two of them that they could go and open the temple. They both in unison asked what temple, as Plo told them to step forward and outstretch their arms, and trust that the Force would do what they asked of it. Anakin and Ahsoka looked at each other as they passed by Plo on opposite sides. Plo lowered himself down to the ground into the tall grass as he looked at both of them before closing his eyes. He felt the Force emanating from both Skywalker and Tano as a loud crunching could be heard. Plo kept his eyes closed as he listened to the structure rise out of the ground. The building stopped as it crescendoed in the air. Plo rose from his knees and placed his arms in the middle of both Anakin's and Ahsoka's backs as he guided them forward gently. Anakin and Ahsoka opened their eyes as they looked at the entrance before them. They asked Plo what this was as he told them that they had discovered an ancient Jedi temple. But not to be wary, Plo continued, as he told them that this wasn't an attempt to bring them back into the Jedi Order. This was a way for them to connect to the Force within the Force itself and increase their connection to the Force. Plo understood that the ancient Jedi had a better connection with the Force, much better than the connection that the modern Order had. Plo explained that the difference between both Jedi Orders and how the Ancient One used a better connection to the Force rather than the modern one. Ahsoka asked why Plo didn't change anything in the modern Order to be like the Ancient One. Plo then admitted that he held his position on the Council because he knew he would outlive Yoda, and assuming that he would become Grand Master as the eldest member on the Order, he would push the Order back into the ancient ways. Anakin asked if that's why Plo was always so quiet. Plo nodded his head. While Plo admitted that it sounded a bit selfish off the tongue, he was doing it because he wanted to help save the Jedi from the same desolation that befell the Sith. The Sith became corrupt and then they caved in. Plo believed the same fate would fall upon the Jedi Order, and he wanted to be the anchor to save the Order from crumbling. But Yoda hadn't given up his role as Grand Master, and each time a new member joined the Council, with the exception of Kenobi, Shaak Ti, and Kit Fisto, the Council became more and more geared towards the political agenda of the Republic. Plo Koon knew that it wouldn't last, and with the war, it only cemented its ill feelings towards the political output of the Council. Anakin asked why Plo always went to the Chancellor's office if that was the case. Plo exclaimed that he didn't want to, but he had to play the role because of his lifetime spot on the High Council, and he also did it because he needed to be savvy enough to pull the Order out of the Republic politics once he became Grand Master. But that was years away. How many years? Plo didn't know. As the three entered the temple, Ahsoka asked why Plo left the Order if that was his long-term plan. Plo admitted it was because he foresaw the end of the Jedi, but there was nothing he could do to stop it. Plo continued asking if they remembered Pong Krell. Anakin nodded his head. Plo told him that Krell came to him about a vision before losing his mind on Umbara. Krell had a vision just a month before the first battle of Geonosis. Plo believed him and admitted that he would work on it with the Council. But when the Clone Wars started, and the Jedi dragged themselves right into the middle of it, there was nothing that he could do. Ahsoka asked why Krell had such a high casualty number and if that was why. Plo admitted that Krell seemed to believe that the Jedi would succumb to a grand army. Plo believed it would be the Separatists because of the incredible numbers, but Krell believed it had to do something with the clones. So that's why Krell tried to continuously kill off the troops. And Krell tried to take the easy route when the Council didn't resolve the war by leaving it or finding peace. The three entered the main chamber as both Ahsoka and Anakin were completely shocked by what Plo had just revealed to them. Plo then told the two of them to seat themselves on the ground and begin to meditate. They asked why out of curiosity, not discrepancy, as Plo told them that their journey and their paths would be revealed to them if they gave themselves up to the Force. This was the first step that they would take into a larger galaxy. As the three entered their own version of meditation, Plo would be the first to see his journey unfold as he stood up and entered a room. Plo was surrounded by fire. He looked around and then a young man approached him. Plo didn't recognize the boy, but he had similar features to that of Anakin. Plo asked the boy what it was, as the boy asked him to follow him. Plo followed as he watched the fiery landscape dissipate, and he saw the peaceful meadows of Andrillion and Scilly combined into one. Plo was surprised to see these places, as the little boy spoke up, calling him teacher. Plo nodded his head and continued behind. Plo then saw the people of the Barrandov sages looking towards him as the two continued through another room. Plo looked forward and saw not death but peace. Clones intermingled into galactic society with Jedi around those helping people out. Plo turned around as he saw Anakin, a bit older with some wrinkles and hair like Qui-Gon down the middle of his back. Next to him was Ahsoka with longer tails and a more mature face with two lightsabers, completely different to the ones that she currently had. The boy standing next to Plo grabbed his hand and said to Plo, referring to him as master, that Anakin was his father. Plo looked down and then over to the Skywalkers. Anakin called out Luke's name, and the little boy ran over and leaped up into his father's arms. Anakin told Luke to say goodbye to Auntie Ahsoka. They were going to go visit Padme. Plo watched as Anakin thanked Plo for helping him. Plo looked over his shoulder as he watched Anakin get into his speeder with his boy and go away, as Ahsoka bowed to Plo and turned around and began walking away as well. Plo stood between the two who left Coruscant with. They were on Coruscant, and it seemed as if there was a new chancellor. Plo then stumbled out of his vision and looked around to see both Anakin and Ahsoka gone. It seemed as if they had both entered their respective visions. Ahsoka's vision saw her surrounded by light as she looked around trying to calm her mind. Ahsoka then saw an older version of herself, the same one she encountered on Mortis not so long before. The older version of herself said that she was on the right path. She needed to trust who she had because they could save her when she needed them to save her. Ahsoka looked back over her left and saw a massive city. The older Ahsoka vanished in thin air as Ahsoka turned and started walking towards the city. She heard a voice call out in a dark, slimy tone, saying that he was looking for Kenobi. Ahsoka turned to see a red lightsaber heading towards her face. Ahsoka turned around as she opened up her eyes and looked into darkness. She couldn't see anything, and then she heard a voice of her master. He called out to her and thanked her for her courage that she had. Ahsoka turned around and then saw a hooded man crawling over Anakin as he cried out for her help and drowned in suffering. Ahsoka tried to help, but before she could get to Anakin, she was suffocated out of the vision. Ahsoka tumbled back and looked at Plo, who was still sitting in his meditative state. Anakin, on the other hand, was gone. Anakin walked through a tunnel in his vision. He stepped forward and saw a reflection of himself in a pool of tears. Anakin looked at the reflection as his face began to mold into destruction and pull itself out of the water. Anakin heard a heavy breathing as he turned around to see a masked figure with a red lightsaber marching towards him. The voice from the metallic beast said that Anakin's lack of faith was disturbing. The mechanical monster reached out his hand and forced him through a wall as Anakin stood in a forest. He looked around and heard someone scream the name traitor as a hooded smaller man crept around the corner of some trees as he looked at Skywalker and ignited a red crossblade lightsaber. Anakin looked at him and recognized some familiar features on the young man's face as he was lifted out of the vision with the crashing sound of an explosion. Anakin turned around and looked at a discombobulated face that looked like a combination of people he knew from all being mentors. And then this combination of faces tried to rip through him with a crimson lightsaber. Anakin darted back as he fell back through and looked over to see Plo and Ahsoka still meditating. The three of them then got up after about an hour of meditation. This trip was completely successful. Each member had a revealing vision about the future. Which ones would come true, only time would tell. But there was a possibility for failure, happiness, success, and tragedy. The future, though, could only be impacted by the decisions the group made now. As the three exited the former Jedi Temple, they all went back to camp. When they entered the temple, it was daytime, and currently it was pitch black out. Thanks to R2, the camp was adequately lit up so that the three Jedi could find their way back to their little camp once their journey was complete. Plo told the two of them that they had a couple places he would like to take them to, but for now they would stay on Lothal until Ahsoka and Anakin knew it was time for the next leg of their journey. Ahsoka and Anakin respected Plo a lot, but this new journey heightened their respect for the elder, former Jedi Master. He knew how to help people find who they needed to be. Some may say he would have been the perfect Grand Master within the Jedi Order, but for now they were getting a lot of experience that they needed. Ahsoka and Anakin would spend time on Lothal. Ahsoka would go off into the capital city by herself and begin to interact with other peoples as citizens. It felt nice. As for Anakin, he and Plo would stay in the fields. Anakin admitted he wanted to understand more about Plo's way with the Force. Anakin was brave, cunning, powerful, brilliant, and bright, but he didn't have the mental maturity it took to be what the role of the Chosen One demanded from him. Plo and the rest of the Council understood this, because Anakin was a normal 20-year-old who spent the last 11 years within the Order. If he was raised inside the Order, it'd be much different, but that wasn't the case. Plo Koon knew what he had to do to get Anakin to see and to be where he needed to be, but he didn't know if Anakin was ready to get there. Plo told Anakin that he would have to trust the process, become more patient, and demand nothing but trust from the Force. Anakin understood. The process was going to be difficult, more so than Anakin realized, but Plo began with Anakin. It wasn't Obi-Wan's fault for not being able to teach this to Anakin, but it was something that Anakin would have benefited from had the Council elected a member like Plo, Mace, or Yoda to train Anakin. Though everything seemed to work out in the way that it needed to. Plo would bring Anakin to the site of the rock formations near the Jedi Temple. Anakin asked if they were going back in. Plo told Anakin that they were going to scale the mountain without equipment, and then, on the top, find balance. Anakin looked at Plo a little cross-eyed, and then watched the Jedi Master leap up the side of the rock formation. Anakin followed in Plo's footsteps, but without harmony, Anakin slid back down to the bottom of the rock formation. Plo took his time, and he eventually found his way to the top of the rock formation, as he looked down at Anakin. Anakin looked up and asked how he did that. Plo told Anakin that he needed to find peace within himself. He told Skywalker to find that peace and then go for it. Anakin nodded his head as he cleared his mind from everything. He wasn't a Jedi, he wasn't a general, he was just a Force user. He needed to trust himself for the first time ever. So, that's what Anakin did. He climbed up the formation slowly. Plo watched and nodded his head as he watched Anakin scale the rock formation. He was incredibly proud of Skywalker. Anakin used the Force to propel himself up, and then slipped. But Anakin, finding peace within himself at this moment, was able to use a slip to his advantage as he lodged his metallic hand against the wall and used it to throw himself up. Plo watched as Anakin got up to the top as he reached his hand out and pulled Skywalker up to the top with him. Anakin looked at Plo with the biggest smile on his face. Plo nodded his head as he told Anakin to join him on the opposite peak. They would stand in unison, and then Plo would guide Anakin through the intensive meditative process to connect him closer to the Force than he had ever been before. Anakin looked over as he leapt from the peak to the other peak. Plo and Anakin stood evenly at the top as Plo instructed Anakin to follow each movement he made. Anakin nodded his head as he watched Plo stretch himself out, and then ever so delicately lift his leg into the air as he moved his arms around. Anakin watched the clouds passing by create a formation and a swift blow away from Plo as he cleared the side of the top of these rocks. Anakin followed in unison as he too lifted his leg and swung his arms around delicately to push and pull the Force around him, and then Anakin realized it all. He finally understood. It's like it all clicked in his mind at once, that he couldn't control the Force, because he had to become a vessel of the Force. He couldn't tell the Force what to do, but he could use what the Force gave him as a guide for his own potential. Anakin loosened up on pushing and pulling as he calmed himself down, and the clouds near him parted. Plo told Anakin that he was doing great, but now they would hold this position for as long as possible. Anakin nodded his head as he focused on the Force. Both Plo and Anakin focused on the Force as something incredible happened. The two of them cemented their bond with one another within the Force. Their bond was never shaken, never rocky. It was always firm and informative. Anakin always felt peace with Plo, and Plo always saw opportunity within Skywalker. By some miracle, or just them simply trusting the Force and each other, Anakin and Plo became a dyad within the Force. The two of them would spend several hours on top of these peaks as their bond became closer and closer, tighter and tighter. It was like nothing could come between the two of them. For Plo and Anakin, it was an accidental discovery of a dyad that existed between the two of them that was just ready to burst. That's what made it so special. They didn't seek out the dyad, but they found it through their connection and trust of the Force. The dyad wasn't a master and apprentice dyad, rather it was built through a mutual respect and understanding of one another. Plo and Anakin would stay put as the sun fell down on Lothal, and all the way through until the sun rose of the peaceful planet. When the sun rose, Plo lowered his leg down and looked over. Anakin was still perfectly still, but the movement of Plo turned Anakin's attention over as he too lowered his leg and looked at his friend. Plo bowed in respect to Anakin as Anakin did the same to Plo. All of a sudden, Plo would revolve his body backwards and flip off the platform. Anakin did the same as both former Jedi landed on the ground and looked at each other. They walked over towards their camp to sit down and talk about the Force for a little bit. Plo wanted to understand what Anakin felt through the Force, and Anakin wanted to know if Plo felt their connection deepen between the two of them within the Force. Anakin would explain the light bulb moment for him, as Plo would tell Anakin that the two of them had become a dyad in the Force coincidentally. Ahsoka would spend about a full week inside of the capital city of Lothal, until she eventually left the capital city and returned to her friends at the campsite. When she returned, she got up to see Anakin glow like a real happy man. Anakin had moments where he lit up like the night sky, but Anakin at this moment glowed like a star. He was truly happy as a man, and this unsung happiness made him find more beauty within the Force itself. Ahsoka also found something within herself that she wasn't able to express as a Jedi, which was her true affection for life. Not just any individual, but Ahsoka loved the experience that life provided to everyone. The experience was wonderful, and the ability to see and share that experience with others, as seen as a normal person, was incredible. As a Jedi, one was given a godlike status, and it was because of that incredible effect a Jedi could have on people, it got tiresome. Because Jedi, other than their astonishing connection to the Force, were just like everyone else. They did have their feelings and their emotions, and even though they didn't talk about it, they weren't permitted to technically have them. Ahsoka came back to the camp with excitement, and even more so to see the bond between Plo and Anakin. Plo was grateful to see her back because they were going to go to a world that Ahsoka would be especially happy to go and travel to. There was a lineage on this planet, long lost to time, but their documents and their temples still stood on the planet. Once the ship was loaded up, Plo Koon would direct R2 to plug in his coordinates for Shili. The three were going to Ahsoka's homeworld. This for Ahsoka was a benefit. Going to Shili had an important piece of history and lineage for Ahsoka that she didn't know about. It was told to Plo Koon, and it was promised by Plo that he would eventually bring Ahsoka back to Shili so that he could show her. This was all when Plo picked up Ahsoka when she was just a child. When the trio arrived on Shili, there was an obvious disturbance in the Force. It was as if the darkness covered the planet. It really didn't, but there was a hint of darkness throughout Shili, and a former Jedi were going to snuff it out. Luckily, the people on Shili hadn't noticed that there was any darkness anywhere, though anyone that was from Shili and had a connection to the Force were already brought to the temple, Shakti and Ahsoka being great examples of such. The three would walk around the main town until Plo Koon came across a solar sailor. He knew who it belonged to. Plo tapped into his comlink and told Anakin and Ahsoka to clear the people from the streets. The moment Plo put down his comlink, he looked to his left and heard a lightsaber from the left. It was Count Dooku. He returned to Shili because he was going to send the Zygerrian slavers back to the planet. Republic control of Shili was weak, but with the Jedi here, it would be more resistance than the Zygerrian Empire could handle. Dooku leapt up into the air as Plo Koon doubled back and ignited his lightsaber. Dooku landed and struck down at Plo, who bounced back and parried against the master duelist. Both Plo and Dooku had a lot of respect for one another. They were very evenly matched in most of their spars. Plo had the slight advantage and had a slightly better win percentage against Dooku. Being from Doran, Plo had a natural strength, and physical strength at that gave him the slight edge over most human duelists. People from Doran were naturally stronger than humans, but someone as experienced, fast, and precise as Plo made him an exceptional difficult foe. Plo backed up. He knew how aggressive Dooku could be in the beginning of a fight. That's how normally Dooku beat a foe. It was a quick aggression with Form 2 at the beginning of the fight, though Plo Koon was specialized in aggression, being a master of Form 5. Dooku struck faster and faster, trying to bypass Plo's defense, but it was no use. Plo was extremely quick as he backpedaled away, and from each strike that Dooku took at him. Plo saw that he was running out of space as he pushed back, throwing the older Dooku off balance. Plo saw his opportunity as he swung forward. Dooku blocked, parried, and then tumbled back. It was Plo Koon's special 3-point saber combo. Dooku rolled around and pulled his blade up to block Plo, as Plo brought his blade down on Dooku's blade, knocking the Count back again. Dooku doubled back as he looked for an escape, shooting lightning at Plo. The former Jedi Master stretched his arm out to deflect the lightning in as he took it all in. Dooku didn't expect what came next as yellow lightning shot out from Plo's hands and smacked into the Sith apprentice, sending him tumbling back into a wall. Plo realized that this could help end the war if he got Dooku back to the Republic. But from his right, 4 Magna Guards popped out and surrounded Plo. 2 of them ran back and got Dooku up and took him back to his ship. Plo Koon wasn't having it as he struck down forward, swinging his blade around violently. He knew that Dooku couldn't escape, but the Magna Guards were too good of enough a distraction. By the time Plo Koon cut down the 2 guards, the Solar Sailor had taken off into the air and disappeared. Plo Koon turns around after sheathing his lightsaber. He looked at Ahsoka and Anakin, who came running down the street. He was currently down. Anakin and Ahsoka asked if Plo was alright. Plo nodded his head and told them that he just came in contact with Count Dooku. It seemed as if the Count was here trying to begin enslavement of the Shili people again. After Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin disrupted the Zygerrian slavery operations, they lost a lot of credits and a lot of respect with the Separatists. Dooku was visiting the world to see if they could be enslaved again, but that seemed completely unlikely at the time. Plo turned around and asked if they were ready to go. They looked back at Master Plo as he told them that there was so much more for them to learn, not just about the Force, but themselves. The visions they had back on the Thal could give them insight into what they would become. For Plo Koon, he had the most overwhelmingly positive vision for the two of them. It was because, as an elder, he understood that the two of them would come around and come out of their unknown state of mind. Both Anakin and Ahsoka didn't know what the future held for them, so the fear of the unknown led the two of them to believe that their path could be littered with darkness. This fear of the unknown could always lead to someone to believe the future held darkness for them, but Plo knew that the future could be full of amazing possibilities because he lived through that fear of the unknown. Plo's vision was pure because he had surpassed these feelings of a younger individual. He as an older man foresaw the possibilities for both Ahsoka and Anakin. Both Ahsoka and Anakin turned around and followed Plo as he led them down the streets of the Shilly City. Plo Koon began speaking about the older priestesses that was here in Shilly. They were no longer established, but Plo expressed that he promised to bring Ahsoka to their cave when she was old enough. The priestesses were an ancient order. They worshipped the Force, and none of them but the head priestess was Force-sensitive. This order of beings were entirely female, and their sole goal was to help others. They were extremely efficient at it. Because of their affinity towards the Force, they were able to be better at helping others. Ahsoka asked what the order was called as Plo told her that the order of priestesses were called the Bazik priestesses. Ahsoka's mother had studied everything about the priestesses, which is how she knew how to trust the Jedi Order with Ahsoka. The priestesses weren't necessarily close with the Jedi, but they did respect the Order, and on their few occasions throughout Bazik history, they were in contact with the Jedi. The three former Jedi would walk through the streets and out into the wilderness down a path. The day was rather cold. Shilly was just beginning to enter its winter months. Luckily for Ahsoka, Anakin, and Plo, the place where they were heading was well covered, and would be a great place to stay for the three of them to stay warm through the night that would come. As the day continued, the three would start having on and off conversations of a deep nature. Anakin and Ahsoka would talk about their feelings towards the war and how it affected the Jedi. This conversation would revolve around back to how the three of them felt about Barriss's decision to bomb the Jedi Temple. All three of them agreed that what she did was wrong, but they had a lot to discuss about whether or not the motive was right or wrong. Anakin thought that the motive behind it was completely wrong, but he could also see why it was right. Mostly, he saw it as wrong because bombing is a bad thing. He believed that the war had gotten to the point of no return. Anakin saw the war as something that needed to be won. It wasn't always that way, but after the Separatists bombed Coruscant during the peace talks, Anakin threw out any restraint for understanding the Separatists or their war effort. So he didn't appreciate that Barriss was trying to stop something that wouldn't be ended without more bloodshed. Of course, Anakin hated the concept of war, who didn't, but he believed that what Barriss did was a cowardly decision to avoid the inevitable. He also believed that Barriss took the lives of innocents, those of which would never see the battlefront. While both Ahsoka and Plo agreed with Anakin on the fact that Barriss was wrong for bombing the temple, they believed the motive behind it was actually kind of right. Anakin asked why, as Ahsoka explained that from her perspective, the Jedi had actually fallen from their true code. They no longer held their peace in high regard, and all they did was serve as generals. As a Jedi, it was disgraceful to do something that they held so dear or go against it. Plo continued off of what Ahsoka said, explaining that it showed the corruption that sat within the Jedi Order, and within the Council specifically. That if a Padawan learner had to expose the Order for its inability to keep the peace, then maybe they had fallen from their grace. Plo explained more of what he had explained earlier about how the Council had lost sight of its own vision. All three of them saw each other's own perspectives, and believed that they were rightly placed. Anakin then pointed ahead and asked if that was a Bazik cave. Plo nodded his head as they stopped. The cave had been caved in. Plo noted that it was probably the Zygerians that did it. When the Zygerians came to Shilly, they ripped apart the entirety of the planet, and any signs of strength, and because the Bazik priestesses were held in such high regard, they tore down the only reminder of the ancient order. Walked up to the cave and told them that they shouldn't disturb the silence of the cave. Ahsoka asked why, as Plo responded to her, telling her that the cave being sealed up meant that they should leave it be. Their time had come and gone, so they should respect that their time was gone. Ahsoka asked about setting up camp. Plo looked around and noted that there was a forest nearby that would provide a shelter for the night. Plo Koon took the two of them as they each prepared a different section of their makeshift camp. Plo didn't anticipate this, but he knew he could make it up for preparing something new. When the camp was set up and a small fire was started, the three of them found a comfortable piece of land around the fire, and they all began to talk again. Plo Koon spoke up, and he told the two of them that he was sorry that they couldn't experience the cave of the Bazik priestesses, but Plo explained that there was an ancient secret within the cave. Ahsoka spoke up asking about what that secret was, as Plo told her that within the cave, the priestesses carried the only known blade of its kind. It wasn't a gift from the Jedi, but it was created by the founder of the Bazik priestesses. The blade that they had was pure white, and the priestesses had achieved a peaceful balance, and because of that peaceful balance, the blade was able to become pure. It shined an ice-white color and it glowed through the darkest hours. Anakin leaned up and looked over at Plo as he continued telling that no one really knew how they crafted it. The Jedi were never able to replicate the blade, and so the priestesses were often held in high regard, though Dooku's knowledge of it was probably what caused them to blow the cave down and hide the secrets of the priestesses. Ahsoka looked over at the fire and wondered about what Plo was talking about. Plo spoke up telling her that Master Sunube was the closest one to achieving it within the Order, because for a period of his life he was completely obsessed with the Bazik priestesses, but he never was able to get rid of the light blue tint from his blade. Ahsoka asked why that was, as Plo assumed it was because of his connection to the Jedi Order and the following of their morals and code. If Terra decided not to follow that code, then maybe he would be able to purify his blade fully. Ahsoka mentioned that she would like to try and attempt this. Ahsoka asked her former master, Anakin, if he would like to join her in this, as Anakin told her that it wasn't what he was interested in, as she might be purifying her own blade for her own good. For Ahsoka, that would be her own journey and her own decision. Anakin would rather continue learning about the Force without thinking about restrictions that purification of a blade could happen to him in the process. Anakin leaned back and closed his eyes as Ahsoka and Plo continued talking about everything that Plo knew Ahsoka would have to achieve with the purification of her blades. Plo Koon told her that it would take mind and balance to complete this path. Ahsoka listened in as Plo explained everything he knew and everything that she would have to go through. Purification wasn't an easy path for anyone. It required time, balance, patience, and a whole lot more freedom than the Jedi Code could allow for. Ahsoka listened and took in all of her knowledge as the fire began to die out. Ahsoka's eyes fell heavy on her as Plo told her to get some rest. Ahsoka expressed that because of the fire getting lower, she was starting to get cold in the cold night. Plo understood as he stood up and gave her his robe, and told her that he'd be back with more firewood to keep the fire going. Ahsoka tried to deny the donation, but Plo, being the fatherly figure he was to Ahsoka, couldn't take that refusal. The night would carry on as it passed in the daytime. When the sun rose, Anakin was the first one up. He noticed that everyone was still sleeping, so he quietly moved out of the sanctuary of the forest and went into the opening before the Bazik cave and began his normal morning regiment. Some things from his experience with Plo on the Thal, but he mostly kept his old regiment, which for him was very focused on physicality. Anakin was a very built man, and he didn't get that way by being lazy. Anakin got to his physical build through months of hard work and dedication. He kept up with it. Something Plo taught Anakin was more of a pragmatic approach to exercise, at least in Plo's opinion. It focused more on physical positions to increase mobility and flexibility. There was breath control and an array of mind-calming actions and activities. For Anakin, he did this as a cooldown. It was a good way to come down from the adrenaline high that came from a hard workout. Anakin continued with his workout. Plo eventually woke up as he noticed Ahsoka was still sleeping own side of the forest to avoid disrupting Anakin's regiment. Plo settled down and focused on the Force and then ignited his lightsaber. Plo began practicing in his form of lightsaber combat as he twisted around and around. His poise was incredible and his speed was renowned. Anakin heard the lightsaber ignite, and he could also hear it swooshing around, just without clashing with branches or hitting trees. It was more difficult than it sounded, and it required mind, focus, and absolute precision. Anakin finished up his workout within the hour as he and Plo met up to discuss the next location of where they'd be going. Plo told him that they were going to be going to Andrillian. Anakin asked if that's where they were going to visit the ancient temple of Bo-Katan. Plo nodded his head and congratulated Anakin on his knowledge of galactic history. Anakin smiled and looked over at the sound of a broken branch. Ahsoka had just woken up, a sight all too familiar to Anakin. The two of them spent months on campaigns, always side by side in the mud of the battlefield, so good that they were going to Andrilion. Plo nodded his head again, and then said that they would have to leave when both Anakin and Ahsoka were ready to leave. After a couple of hours, everyone was ready to go. They walked all the way back to where they landed their ship, and immediately left the planet. As they traveled through space, there wasn't much to talk about. They talked about every little thing they could, and a little conversation of the Clone Wars began, but nothing more came up other than that in conversation. Anakin and Plo discussed helping the Republic war effort, and while there were plenty of places they could help, Anakin and Ahsoka were the two poster boy and girl of the war. Both of their faces were on billboards across the Republic, alongside of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mace Windu. These billboards were very simply, join the Republic or support the Republic, but the two of them were well known. This could be both a good thing and a bad thing. It would be a good thing because they could help bolster support for other worlds that were neutral being infected by the plague of separatist support, like the planet Ahsoka, Rex, Anakin, and Obi-Wan went to earlier in the war to help Saw Gerrera and his sister. But then again, the negative side could be the public opinion on the Jedi, mostly because the Jedi had been seen as bad for the Republic, so if the Jedi got involved, even though they were no longer Jedi, it could technically be bad. The war had gotten worse, and those of the galactic population that were familiar with the Jedi decided to simply blame the Jedi. It was, after all, a simple fix for everything to just blame the Jedi, and the public during wartime was very easily swayed to believe in such, especially when every time a planet burned to the ground, it was the Jedi and the clones who marched into the broken gates looking to repair what they had done. Anakin and Plo agreed that they should do something for the people of the Republic, but as of right now, their place wasn't on the battlefront or leading rebellions on separatist worlds. The Republic needed to handle it, without the three of them. Ahsoka spoke up to cut down the tension by asking why they were heading to Andrilion. The tension wasn't because of a disagreement, it was just more so the natural reaction to talking about such a stressful topic, such as war. Plo and Anakin turned over as Anakin mentioned that they were going to the Temple of Bo-Katan. Ahsoka asked why, and Anakin looked back over at Plo, who told the two of them that it would be one step closer to finding the balance they both needed. It was a great planet to avoid the war and anything that might cause disruption to the two individuals trying to learn more about the Force. When the three landed on Andrilion, Plo suggested that they prepare an elongated camp. The plan was to stay on the world for at least a couple of months. If they could do that, then there wouldn't be any issue with their learning or their development. The three of them set up a solid camp, the camp that had everything they needed and enough rations to last more than a couple of months. It was perfect, but what was unknown left Anakin and Ahsoka interested in what Plo had to show them. Though Plo wasn't going to show them anything, Plo came with the two of them after they set up the camp and told them that he would be their guide and their teacher, but this was their journey here on Andrilion. He brought them here for them. Plo couldn't accelerate the process because the process couldn't be rushed. Plo told the two of them that it was the best version of themselves that could only be achieved if they put it into practice and focused on it for the time being. Plo told the two of them that they could work together, but because Ahsoka was still 16 and Anakin was 21, he suggested that they take different routes, mostly because their experience was much different. Anakin and Ahsoka agreed with this as they both carried on into the temple. The Temple of Bo-Katan was very old and a little bit wrecked, though it was in very good condition overall. Plants and life had made its way into the structure and called itself home at this point. Ahsoka voyaged down into the bottom of the temple. There were thousands of ancient hieroglyphics, some of which showed the Jedi, others looked to be the priestesses from Shili, and even some of the other hieroglyphics looked to be the Barando sages from Plo Koon's home world. Ahsoka found this to be extremely interesting as she sorted through all the ancient works. She carried on looking through the information that she had at her disposal. Ahsoka looked on, tracing her hand across the ancient stone. It was chilled to the bone, covered in dust and moss. Ahsoka had to clear some stuff off of it, but for the most part, it was in great condition. Right above her, a couple stories up, Anakin stood in the ruins of the ancient Utarund library. It was full of information. The ancient Utarund were very similar to the priestesses and the Barando sages. They were a group of individuals dedicated to helping people. though members from the Outer Run left the ancient Jedi and created their own order. It was a rebellion against the Jedi, but it wasn't a group of gray Jedi or even an aggressive rebellion. It was more so a group of Force users who were committed to the Force rather than some self-proclaimed neutrality. Anakin hated the thought of gray Jedi, and he liked the Outer Run. It was the only history lessons in class that he ever paid attention to at the Jedi Temple. Regardless, Anakin looked at the old document that spoke of the Jedi and the Outer Run's beliefs that at some point there would be a Chosen One. Though the Outer Run believed in the Chosen One in a different perception, and it was that he would be the greatest teacher of the Force. This Chosen One wouldn't be sent to wipe out anyone, not the Jedi nor the Sith. He would be formed from the Force to enlighten the galaxy on how to use the Force to bring everyone together. The Outer Run believed that everyone had the ability to use the Force, they just had to channel it in their own way, regardless of midichlorian count. But the Outer Run had an issue. They couldn't broadcast their message because the Jedi passed them off as something less than what they actually were. The Jedi Grand Master at the time was a narcissist and was completely offended that several members left his order and created a new order. So his message to the galaxy at the time was that the Outer Run was a religious group that worshipped the Jedi, and they were only sent to corrupt people by telling them to pay credits to earn something within the Force. This, of course, was very far from the truth, but by the time the Outer Run tried to go out and show the people of the galaxy how to utilize the Force in their own unique ways, it was too late. Their reputation was tarnished, so they returned to Andrelion and focused on what they could do best, which was harmonize with the Force and preserve their ways. Though that lasted centuries, the Sith eventually came and wiped out every last one of them. And while the Outer Run had their own lightsabers, their order wasn't built on war, fear, or aggression. Their entire development of the lightsaber and the usage of it was completely built around their own lightsaber form of combat. It differed from any of the common 8 forms that were known by the Jedi or Sith. Instead, their lightsaber form was completely focused on tranquility and the usage of the blade to be defensive. In a way, it was a hyper-aggressive version of Form 3, but with the ability to enhance each of its users to a new level of power and ability to use the Force as well. Because the Outer Run were incredibly focused on the Force, it showed in their singular form of lightsaber combat that they just called the Form. The Outer Run preferred the Force to be something that everyone could harness without struggle or without binds, which is why the Outer Run were close with Old Daka and the Night Sisters, mostly because the Night Sisters and their unique perception of the Force allured the Outer Run to become close friends and allies with the Witch Clan. While the Outer Run didn't support the Night Sisters' torment of the Night Brothers, they understood it wasn't their place to disrupt the cultural impact the Night Sisters had on their homeworld of Dathomir. Old Daka was incredible with Force and Force magic, so the Outer Run respected her and even used some of what she taught them. Anakin was arms deep in information. He continued to sort through it for hours. On the outside of the temple, Plo Koon walked around, feeling the great presence that existed here on Andrelion of the Force, and then he heard a familiar voice. Plo turned around and looked at the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn. Plo didn't really have much to say as he paused and waited for the apparition to speak again, as if Plo was just seeing something. Qui-Gon spoke up to Master Plo and told him that he was wise to leave the Order. While Plo and Qui-Gon had a mutual respect for each other, they weren't exactly close, mostly because of Plo's continuous silence during the few times Qui-Gon was inside of the council chambers. Again, all of part of Plo's persona. Plo looked around and then back at Qui-Gon. The ghost continued saying that the end of the war was upon them, and moving Anakin away from the Jedi may have saved the galaxy from darkness. Though Qui-Gon urged that Plo Koon be safe and certain in his decision-making, because if he wasn't, then it could plunge the galaxy into darkness. Because if he wasn't, then it could plunge the galaxy back into the darkness that it could have and would have had Skywalker not left the Order. Plo Koon understood, but didn't. But he told Qui-Gon that he understood what he was hearing, and turned around as the Force Ghost disappeared behind him. Plo Koon looked and saw Anakin sitting at the front steps of the temple. He was looking through an old book. Plo thought he should leave the area so that he didn't disrupt what Skywalker was doing. Down below the surface of the temple, Ahsoka stood in front of a mural of the priestesses and kneeled. She'd been like this for several hours, and she was focused on learning what she could from the past. Ahsoka felt something crawling on her and immediately jumped up to slap down and missed. Ahsoka felt something crawling on her, and her immediate reaction was to slap down, but she missed. Ahsoka leapt up from the ground and she let out a terrible screech and swatted on what was at her leg. Ahsoka looked around, hoping that no one heard it. Ahsoka realized that maybe it was as goofy as this was, it was a representation of what she had to do to learn and maintain her own composure. There were living things everywhere, surrounding her, and she couldn't be distracted by them while she was trying to focus on her own personal growth. Ahsoka stumbled out of the temple, still hoping that no one heard it, and looked to her right. She looked at the forest and then heard the birds chirping. She smiled and then squinted her eyes as she tried to block the sunset from her view. Ahsoka stepped forward towards the sunset and thought about everything that had transpired. Ahsoka looked up at the side of the temple and saw a little platform. Ahsoka leapt herself up and caught a grip of the building and swung herself around and propelled herself up to the little platform. Ahsoka knelt down on the platform and looked across towards the sunset. As Ahsoka did this, she noticed something. It was a perfect path to everything. She could see perfectly the sun. There was a clearing of trees, natural of course, that led to the sun, and beneath the sun was a lake that was currently consuming the massive star. Ahsoka looked at it and smiled. The Ahsoka must have placed this spot here to have a personal growth place for the Ahsoka members. Ahsoka sat and focused on the Force and on the natural beauty. Not just what that natural beauty was incredible, but the Force itself made her feel at rest. Ahsoka felt comfort, because for the first time since she left the temple, she really felt like she made the right decision by letting Plo and Skyguy come along with her. It's not that she minded the company, she just felt that they were bonding more than she was her, but Ahsoka couldn't help but feel like she went down into the depths of Coruscant, she would have been lost. The natural beauty in front of her was not on Coruscant, but it was only here. Of course there was beauty on Coruscant, but nothing like the view that she had right here at the top of the tower of Bo-Katan, of the Temple of Bo-Katar. Ahsoka thought of what could have been as she looked down at her knees and saw writing cut across the surrounding of the spot that she sat herself at. Ahsoka read it aloud as it was in the dialect of Galactic Common. Unlike most of the hieroglyphics here in Andrillion, the writing was legible to anyone who wasn't an ancient Ahsoka. Ahsoka read the words aloud to herself as she said, "Focus not on what was or what will be. Focus on what is." A tear slid down Ahsoka's eye to her face. So much to unravel at 17 in a galaxy so large, but maybe the quote did have a true meaning behind it. If she focused on what she had now, there would be no reason or concern on what would become, because it hadn't happened yet. As for the past, it was done and over with. She was overwhelming herself with decisions she already made and the outcomes of decisions that were not a part of the current life she was living. For now, she had to live the path that she chose. Ahsoka looked back up to the sunset and smiled as a tear fell off her chin and landed on the first word on the phrase, focus. Ahsoka, Plo, and Anakin would stay on Andrillion for the last couple months. Anakin and Ahsoka didn't talk to each other unless they were at camp, preparing for sleep or preparing for a new day of work on their own progress. Ahsoka had come a very long way. She was on the verge of something only her ancestors had achieved. Plo Koon continued doing his daily bits. Most of the time he was just enjoying the life that life had given him. He had two wonderful individuals with him, and he also had the beauty of what Andrillion had beneath his feet. He would sometimes disappear for a couple days and journey throughout the forest and learn more about peace and balance he'd come to love. As for Anakin, he was working his way through the Ahsoka texts. It turned out that the Ahsoka were leagues more advanced than the Jedi. It was their focus and understanding of the Force and becoming everything the Force would permit to them that would allow them to do more with the Force than the Jedi could ever hope to achieve, even more than the Sith, at that matter. Anakin stopped his focus on the lightsaber and pushed himself to dedicated life of understanding of the Force. It also didn't stop him from talking to Padme. No. Anakin and Padme talked to each other over holotime more often than not. Most of the time, it was just the two of them enjoying each other's company. Because they couldn't be with each other, they just rejoiced in the time they had with one another. And while they could be with each other, Anakin was discovering himself. It was more than he could have ever done as a Jedi. So when Padme and Anakin had the little holotime calls, Padme would work on bills and political workings, and Anakin would harmonize with the Force. Of course they would talk with each other, but the pure joy of being able to openly communicate with someone that you loved as much as you wanted was more to Padme and Anakin than anything else. It also led to the two of them talking about expanding their family. While Anakin was more for it than not, Padme suggested that they wait until the war ended so that he and her could enjoy some time as a couple instead of frolicking over little demons. Anakin saw reason with her at this point. Anakin was overall just infatuated with Padme, and always wanted to be around her. As for now, he was very much so excelling at his work in the Force. As for the galaxy's change, the galaxy had entered the third year of combat. The Republic was winning, but there was also one issue for Palpatine. His new apprentice was missing. There was no sight of Anakin, ever. He was gone. And while Palpatine knew Anakin left the Order, he assumed Anakin went to go live with Padme, and that just wasn't the case. Since Sidious had to reform his plan to meet a new criteria of what he had to work with, which was really nothing. The Republic war effort was going brilliantly though. The Outer Rim sieges were going at full speed. The Republic dove in head first, and they had no intention of coming out until everything was over and done with. Regardless, on the focus platform Ahsoka sat on, she sat on it again. This had become her mainstay over the last few months. She came here every day and found harmony and peace within herself. Placed in front of her were two empty hilts, both of which she found inside of the Atarun temple. Next to the two hilts had her two lightsabers, and, well, one of them a lightsaber and the other one a shodo. She did this daily, for the last month. Ahsoka sat here and felt her lightsabers and lift them into the air. Ahsoka's focus made her feel more complete on the inside. Ahsoka kept her eyes closed and her mind empty as the blades she made as a Jedi deconstructed in front of her. The kyber crystals raised into the sunlit sky. A soft breeze moved through the air and the birds' chirping got louder, a triumphant feeling as goosebumps crawled down Ahsoka's arms. And they slowly made their way down into the husk of what were, at the moment, unused hilts. Ahsoka grinned as she opened her eyes. The sun matched her elegance as she reached down and picked up each of the new weapons. Ahsoka ignited them, and from the ignition switch came two purified ice-white blades. Ahsoka looked at them and then stood to her feet. She looked them up and down and then sheathed both of her blades. Ahsoka leaned against the wall and smiled. She had finally done it. It was done by no one else in centuries, but this was done by her own will. The first true. Later that night, she would show off her newest accomplishment to both Anakin and Plo. They both loved it, which they would express their excitement and happiness for her. Both Anakin and Ahsoka had made significant progress during their time on Andrillion. Couldn't be happier with their success. While Plo Koon didn't really have any known while he was here, he did get closer with entities within the Force. He had interactions with the ghost of Qui-Gon a couple other times. At a certain point, he traveled off-world to visit the Bendu, and it was just overall an enlightening experience for Plo, and it reminded him a lot of the experience he had on Lothal during his vision. Though Anakin, on the other hand, at the end of the day, experienced a massive growth of his power. Though he wasn't the same duelist he was during the war. He spent most days levitating in the air and focusing on the Force, using the Force to hold massive boulders up next to him. Anakin relished in everything he had. As the three of them advanced their personal lives and their personal developments, Plo Koon told them that their final place for the three of them to go would be coming next. When they were ready, they would leave, but all three of them were ready, so they headed towards the hidden world of Doran. It was Plo Koon's home world, and it would be their final destination of the trio of planets the three of them would hit on Plo Koon's plan. After that, the three of them had the much more developed and advanced members prepared for the next journey. Over the course of the last several months, they kept informing the other about their personal successes and handing over tips and tricks for achieving them in their own developments. The three of them were all far beyond advanced, and it was about time that they finished their journey with Plo Koon, considering the most advanced Force users in the galaxies. Maybe it was a little personal, but on Doran, Plo Koon would bring Ahsoka and Anakin to the still functioning Order of the Barrando Sages. These were all Plo Koon's beings, all from his homeworld, and all beyond incredibly intelligent and force-savvy. Plo enjoyed being around them because he believed that he learned something new every time he interacted with them. He believed it would be off their near year-long journey with one another. When Ahsoka and Anakin arrived, they expected to set up another tent and begin the journey and having to do everything on their own, but they were welcomed with open arms, and the welcoming felt extremely warm. The Barrando Sages loved to welcome others to their planet and give them their own places to stay, plenty of food, and exceeding amounts of care. The three of which, given their own living quarters, were able to enjoy some privacy and an actual bed and some technology too. When they first arrived, the sages suggested that they enjoy their stay for the first night, before they began their daily lessons. This was an exciting time for the three of them. Plo, of course, didn't stay in his room the first night and spent the entire duration with the sages talking about the students and everything they'd come to learn, expressing Ahsoka's accomplishments and Anakin's dedication and success in his craft. The sages were excited to work with both of them, noting that they believed that maybe Anakin and Ahsoka had a greater bond through the Force, though Plo Koon told the sages that they weren't a dyad. He experimented with it when they first arrived on Lothal, and later on in a couple of days, and then on later days, after being on Andrillion for a while, he saw no sign of it. It just turned out that Ahsoka and Anakin were more than anything like siblings. The sages understood and decided that they would approach the bond between Anakin and Ahsoka as that of siblings. The day would come to learn the sages' mastery of the Force. While both of them had attained their own prowess in the Force, it seemed as if there could be more that they could achieve. Mostly Anakin. It seemed as if his distractions caused him to miss some of his self-teachings on Andrillion. This wasn't a knock at Padme at all. So the sages would focus on Anakin a little more, and then on Ahsoka a little more. It would be mostly balanced, and it would be the sages taking Anakin and Ahsoka to meet the Great Bendu. The cool thing about each of these Force groups, whether it be the sages, the priestesses, the Atarund, or any other one of them out there in the galaxy, they all had a greater connection to the Force, just like their connection to each other. They all used these connections to other groups to further their knowledge of the Force. It proved to be effective. Regardless, the group would spend the rest of the year on Doran, though something incredible would happen. The war would come to an end, though the clones didn't execute Order 66, and the Sith were defeated. By some miracle, it seemed the Jedi were able to discover the identity of the Sith through the fallacy of their own plans. Sidious's original reliance on Skywalker fell through, and an intercepted message from Count Dooku led the Jedi Council to lead a strike against the Sith inside of a secret base. It killed both Sidious and Dooku, and subsequently led to the war being ended in a magnificent treaty, recover and rise from the ashes of the Clone Wars. And the clones pick up the pieces, and in recognition of their work to repair the galaxy, they would be released back into it freely. The Jedi would keep themselves intertwined into the politics and lose sight of their vision. Several more members would begin to leave the war after the war ended. Though something rather remarkable would happen to Anakin. Because of what he read in the text of the Atarund, Anakin believed that everyone could learn how to use the Force just a little. In a big galaxy, the amount of good people that were in it, there was such a great opportunity to provide people with the ability to be good not just in their own lives, but in everyone else's lives. Anakin, after learning his final lessons with the sages, would go into Coruscant and live with his wife. While doing that, he would begin to teach citizens across Coruscant how to use the Force, and it worked. No matter how high or low the midichlorian count was, they could be taught if they wanted to learn, and it was beautiful. The capital city lit up with life and prosperity when people started to experience what the Force could do for them. Ahsoka, on the other hand, would carry on with Master Plo Koon, and continue around the galaxy with him, sowing peace and justice. Ahsoka and Plo would be the two to put an end to the reign of Darth Maul and restore peace to the Mandalore and the Outer Rim by dethroning Crimson Dawn. Anakin and Obi-Wan would be able to rekindle their friendship, and their relationship, almost as father and son, grew exponentially when they were united, and the two of them expressed their fondness for the other, of whom they cared very much about. On top of everything, Anakin would be able to eventually start his own family, and ever so elegantly, one day on Coruscant, Plo Koon would be walking with a little boy by the name of Luke Skywalker when his father showed up to take him to go visit Padme and Leia inside of the Senate building. The moment came like deja vu to Plo, but the experiment's art was more than incredible. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. And special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Icy Raptor, Apollo, Mad Meta Studios, Anakin003, and Gort. If you want to see a what if, let me know below or in the comments below. Crossovers, check out the Twitch, Discord, and Patreon if you want to support me in other ways. And if you want to learn how to win a lightsaber, go down below, subscribe. We're giving away 3 lightsabers at 50,000 subscribers. All giveaway winners win inside of the videos, not in the comment sections. That is a scam. Artists, do not give him money. He's a scammer. I will not ask for your money. Giveaways are giveaways. That means they're free. Don't go to the scammer. There's also a doc below. Go read the doc. Write your name on the doc. That's how you get entered into the giveaway. Now let's talk about our video that we have here. This video was fun. I've never done a 2-parter. Actually, I've done a 4-parter back in the day. And the full movie was put together. Now the full movie for this I anticipate being out next Tuesday, so anticipate a full movie next Tuesday. I give it out probably about a week until I do a full upload so that you guys get new content in between the finale and the full movie. That's just a personal thing. If you have any ideas against that, let me know down below. I do read your comments. One other thing, let's talk about our video. So that's obviously why we're here, so we're going to talk about the video. This was fun. Now, the ending is probably going to have some ugh from people, and I'm anticipating that, I'm not going to lie. But this video was something more than just an action piece. There's an action piece that ends part 1, and we all know it's there, but I wanted this to be something more than an action finale. I didn't want Anakin to be the one that has to kill him, because I wanted to kind of follow a different prophecy, and I brought back some other things, and I made up some new characters and new things, which was the priestesses of Bazak, which are from Shilly, which again I made up, and of course we brought back the Atarund and Andrillion and the Temple of Bo-Katan from the Anakin being trained by Qui-Gon video that we did. I thought it would be an opportunity to bring these characters together and kind of do something unique that I haven't really done before. Yes, I've talked about the Force and how people can use the Force to, you know, but I really wanted this to be something more than that. And that's kind of what I wanted to emphasize here, is that Anakin is more than just a chosen one. We always label him as a chosen one. I kind of wanted to give him something more than just being something for the Jedi. And I wanted him to be something more, not just for himself, but see himself as more, and let people see him as more. And that's kind of what I had as an idea at the end of this, is that Anakin, instead of going to kill Palpatine, doesn't. He's nowhere in the picture. He's out living his life, and he's doing something greater. He's bringing the best out of people, and that's what I wanted Anakin to be. The chosen one. Forget the myth of the Jedi. Let's have Anakin be this unsung hero in the galaxy, right? And I know the stories about Plo and Ahsoka, but I'll get to them in a second. I just want to talk about this transformation in Anakin and let him be this teacher, not just for Jedi, not just for Force users, but for everyone, to bring the best out of everyone, because everyone has a Force in them. It's in everyone. It's a spark within everyone. Everyone has the Force. It's just a matter of, you know, can they use it like the Jedi? Because everyone has a Force. It just doesn't. The Jedi criteria for the Force is like 4,000 midichlorians or something like that. It's like there's a certain level for people to have midichlorians to join the Order, but everyone has the midichlorians. That's kind of the whole point of them, is that they're everywhere. They're like atoms, essentially, that binds the galaxy together. So why don't we take advantage of that? Why doesn't everyone get to use the Force? You know, not saying that the Force isn't special or that the Force should be special, but you know, everyone has a spark in them, and I'm kind of tying this back to real life. Everyone has their own spark. Everyone has a spark in them, and Anakin's bringing that spark out of them, because everyone has potential for something. That's just the truth. Everyone has something in them, and that's kind of what I'm going for there. It's not trying to take anything away from the Force, not trying to take anything away from what Lucas set up. It's kind of going off of what Lucas set up, saying that it's potential that everyone has. Everyone has it, and because the story wasn't a story specifically about Anakin, I get to do that with Anakin. I get to give Anakin this potential to be not just the chosen one, but more than that to everybody else. As for Ahsoka, I wanted to give her the story of how she was able to obtain her purification of lightsabers, and I thought, what better place to do that on Andrillion. Maybe I'll pat myself on the back for that, but I really won't, because we aren't egotistical here. But I thought having her do it on Andrillion would be a fun place to do it, because I set up Andrillion in a previous story, as I mentioned, the Qui-Gon trained Anakin story, and I kind of wanted to revisit it in this story, because I think Ahsoka would have a much better experience, whether it be with Anakin by himself or with Plo and Anakin. I don't see Anakin not leaving the Order if Plo leaves the Order. I'm just gonna be straight up with you there. That's just not happening. Anakin's not gonna not leave the Order if Plo Koon is just like, yeah, I'm done, bye. You know, that's not gonna happen. So for Plo and Ahsoka, their stories are much different, right? And I think Plo would have the idea to take them out into the galaxy and be like, look, I have achieved this. I've not hit my ceiling, but I'm getting there. So let me guide you to hit your ceilings. Let's get you out there and experience this. And I think Ahsoka at first, when she goes to Lothal, kind of has this idea that she's going to go out and just interact with citizens and become one of them and not experience this raw power that she has within her. And I think that's what I kind of captured in the beginning of this, and it's kind of a mirror to Clone Wars, like how she goes and interacts with the twins, which I'm not a big fan of that arc, but it shows how she goes out and does something, let's say, less significant than who she really is, to only come back and discover what she can really do with the Force, which is purify her lightsabers, which is an incredible feat. Now, that's one connection I made with the Bazik priestesses, saying that, oh, you know, her ancestors did this. You know, her ancestors were the only other ones to accomplish the purification of a lightsaber, and I thought that'd be a cool tie-in for this. And I hope you guys appreciate the mirroring and what George would like to say is, it's like poetry. It just rhymes. You know, it all goes back to the creator of Star Wars, and it's all an homage to him. It's all taking the amazing universe he created and kind of just building off of it, and not trying to be egotistical with something that's not mine, right? And something that I wanted to do with Plo, and I think it was fun to do with Plo, is kind of give them this master role without making him an overbearing master. We've done What If Plo Trained Anakin, one of the first videos on the channel, and it's a lot of fun, and you know, I might revisit it at some time, but I wanted Plo to kind of just be this guide, right? He's not the main thing that's driving Anakin and Ahsoka. It's Anakin and Ahsoka that are driving themselves, but he's there as a guide. He's there to be there for them when they need him. And it turns out when they first start out with him, they need him, but they slowly start to not need him anymore because their reliance on themselves has made them better. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I love the way the story ended. It's been a lot of fun doing this little mini-series. Look forward to another one. I got another one planned in the next week, right before Tales of Jedi comes out, so stay tuned for a part 1, part 2, one-hitter next week. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love. Don't forget to subscribe, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.